All right, let's talk about the soul of software. Today, we're going to trace the wild story of how the code that runs our world gets made, from this rebellious, almost artistic thing to a massive global industry. But that raises a really big question, right? What if we lost along the way? You've probably heard this one before. For a long time, this was the celebrated mantra of Silicon Valley. It was basically a permission slip to innovate, no matter the cost.
Yeah, that's where it gets complicated. And to really get it, to understand how we got here, we've got to go way, way back to the beginning. So let's set the scene. Software culture didn't just pop up in some corporate boardroom. Nope. It actually started as a full-blown counterculture movement.
You have to picture it. The very first programmers, they were this eclectic mix of academics and these solitary, idealistic thinkers, and they were all wrapped up in these anti-authoritarian, kind of nonconformist ideals.
And that early mindset, wow, it was so different. It was way less about making a buck and way more about just pushing the limits and sharing what you learned freely. The internet was seen as a public utility, and making information open to everyone was considered a basic human right.
But as software started to get bigger, this one culture, well, it started to split right down the middle into two very distinct and, let's be honest, sometimes conflicting identities. So on one side, you have the hacker. Think of them as the explorer, right? They're driven by curiosity, by the sheer joy of solving a puzzle and figuring out what could be. They see a really hard problem and just feel this pull to crack it, just to prove it can be done. And then, on the other side, you've got the engineer. They're all about pragmatism. They take what's possible and make it reliable, affordable, and scalable, ready for the real world. They have to work with budgets, deadlines, all those messy real-world constraints.
And right here, this is the heart of the tension. One's all about pure invention, the other is about implementation. The hacker is like the pioneer, always looking for the next frontier. And the engineer, they're the one building the city after the trail's been blazed.
And get this story really shows you how deep that cultural divide went. Some company founders would actively filter for that pure hacker mindset. It was like a secret handshake, a signal to other hackers that, hey, this tool is for us. It's for building things fast and dirty, not for making perfectly polished systems for the whole world. Okay, so you've got these two mindsets, and guess what? They line up almost perfectly with two totally different ways of doing business. First up, the startup. A startup is basically running on fumes and a dream, right? It's burning through investor cash, racing to prove its idea works before the money runs out. It's the perfect playground for that hacker ethos. It's all about speed and discovery. A business, though, that's a different story. It's found its groove, it's sustainable, funded by its own customers. And now the goal shifts. It's not about finding a market anymore. It's about serving that market reliably. And for that, you need that engineering mindset. So think of it this way. A hacker's startup is a mad dash, a sprint. But an engineer's business, that's a marathon. It's all about stability and long-term growth. So over time, as these little startups blew up into huge, massive businesses, that engineering mindset really started to take over, leading to this highly professional, super structured industry we see today. I mean, with the rise of coding boot camps and all this venture capital money pouring in, the whole game changed. It professionalized everything. Suddenly, you had these massive teams working on incredibly complex systems, and you just couldn't run them like a couple of hackers in a garage. You needed structure. And that's where things like Agile and Scrum came in. They were designed to bring some order to the chaos of building huge things when you don't even know what the finish line looks like. The idea wasn't to be super rigid, but to have a structured way to stay flexible and responsive. And just look at the software world today. It is a far cry from that old-school DIY culture. It's this complex machine of specialized tools and processes, all built for one thing: predictability and quality at a massive scale. But here's the twist. What happens when that rebellious, move fast and break things hacker mantra gets used in a world that desperately needs engineering-level stability? Even the philosophy itself had to grow up. Facebook eventually realized that, hey, maybe breaking things all the time is a bad idea. But the damage was done. That early, reckless version is the one that really stuck in people's minds, and it got dangerously misinterpreted.
And when you take that startup-style risk-taking and apply it to something like critical government systems where stability and security are everything, well, the consequences can be absolutely disastrous. We're not just talking about a bug in an app here. The cost is a huge breach of public trust, and it affects millions of real people's lives. When you're dealing with the public good, the things you break don't just go away. They leave real, lasting scars.
And that's the bottom line, isn't it? The systems that run our society, they're not some sandbox for reckless experiments. Real innovation, especially in the public sphere, has to be built on a foundation of trust and stability. Anything less is just, well, vandalism.
So it all comes back to this: understanding the difference between these two mindsets and knowing which hat to wear and when, that's more critical than ever. Both are valuable, for sure, but using the wrong one at the wrong time, it can be catastrophic. So the real challenge then isn't about choosing one or the other. It's about figuring out how to be both.